All right. Well, we'll get started. First of all, just know that I suck at public speaking. So if my voice starts shaking or my eyes start watering, just forgive me. We'll make it through it. But just know that we're here to give information, not selling you on anything, and we're here to also answer any questions that you have. We are going to be talking about the power of 1031 exchanges and DSTs. How do you build wealth, and then ultimately, how do you defer, minimize, and transfer or eliminate your capital gain taxes? So again, I'm Cory Boldroff. I've been licensed since 2004. I've done everything from fix and flips to foreclosure bailouts to mortgages, real estate. I'm a top producing real estate agent. And now I have my own team where we cover from San Diego to Santa Barbara. So we do help people buy, sell, and invest in real estate, but we also, more importantly, try to help people build, protect, and transfer generational wealth. Unlike most agents that just want to get the commission on the transaction, we actually want to make sure it's the best thing for you and that you're informed on all the different options so that you can self-discover which is best for you and your family. Today, we have a couple of guest speakers. Charles with Inland DST. He actually got pink eye today, so he's not going to be making it. But we will be covering some of the topics that he was going to cover. He is the #1 DST sponsor in the world. And then we have Harry and Troy from Impact. They are a DST brokerage. Again, one of the #1 companies in the country right now for DST exchanges. So they will also be speaking. And then we have Anthony Alosi. He's a 1031 exchange intermediator. So anytime you do a 1031 exchange, you will need an accommodator or a mediator. He is with a very reputable company. So we're going to have him talk about different things that have to do with the 1031 exchanges. If at any point in time you guys have questions, please let me know. That's what we're here to answer. After each speaker, we will have question and answer time. So that way you can ask any questions that you may have. So if you have a certain situation that you want someone to go over, please bring it up. This is the time. A lot of information might go over your head or might be a little overwhelming. So just know that we don't expect you to, fully comprehend and actually understand everything that we're going to be talking about. But we will set up appointments to do strategy sessions and kind of go over those with you more in depth. We are going to be covering, what we do as real estate planners, and then as well as what a 1031 exchange actually is, and then how do you do them and why do you want to do them, and the same thing with DSTs. So DST is Delaware Statutory Trust. It is recognized by the IRS as a way to exchange from a 1031. My group is called the Complete Real Estate Group. We are powered by Keller Williams. We help people build, protect, and transfer generational wealth through real estate. My main goal is to try to help people really defer, minimize, and eliminate capital gain taxes. I feel we all earn our money by what we do for a living. We get taxed at that point in time. Then when we buy property, we get taxed. And the last thing we want to do is get taxed out of the property, especially if we're paying for the maintenance, we're paying for the repairs, we're paying for the mortgages. So we try to look for different things like that. And when we go into a listing presentation, we really explore all the different avenues of what your cost basis is, what your tax implications are, and then we try to see how we can eliminate that. We do specialize in working with investors, wealthy clients, as well as people that are trying to build that legacy plan to transfer it to their kids. We do specialize in doing asset performance tests, capital gain tax assessment, and really make sure that any properties that you guys have, that they are actually optimally performing. And when they're not, we alert you and let you know that there might be a better option somewhere else. Really just making sure, kind of like a financial planner does for your mutual funds, your retirement accounts, we kind of do the same thing, but with your real estate. And we understand real estate a lot differently than most agents do. So we're there actually as your supporting partner. We don't charge a management fee. We don't charge a consulting fee. We make our money off of selling, buying, and investing into real estate, but we want to make sure that it's the best thing for you guys. We are certified in 1031 exchange, DSTs, trusts, probate, senior relocation and transition specialists. Also, we help out with legacy planning and family feud prevention planning. I don't know if any of you guys, or a show of hands, who has heard of a situation where a family inherited money or they were transferring their inheritance to their kids and it ended up in a lawsuit or in a fight, and it ended up being very ugly. Has anyone experienced that? Almost everyone, right? And the sad part is you talk to trust attorneys and they're in the same boat where they try to protect this inheritance and they try to protect your assets, and then they don't really set them up with a family feud prevention plan. And once they get the trust and the person passes away, the beneficiaries end up squandering over, fighting over it. So we try to work with your financial planners, with your trust attorneys, as well as with your tax advisors to make sure that there's a cohesive, holistic approach to making sure that we're doing it in the most advantageous way, which is dispute-free and capital gains tax-free. So those are two main objects. And again, we do help seniors downsize, relocate, and transition to assisted living. Also planning on that next phase of people's lives. So if you have anyone that's going through that, we can help with the logistics of moving, all the stuff inside the home, what's the best avenue for them to pay for that long-term care. And we actually work with the family companies to be the complete solution. We also do fix and flips and fix and holds. So if you guys are interested in investing and you just not know where to start, we also have opportunities where you can join with us and we can partner up with either doing a fix and flip, doing a fix and hold, or if nothing else, have someone at least having a second eyes of what you're getting into and making sure that it's going to ultimately perform for what your goals are. Today, we're going to cover real quickly about what the market outlook looks like, how to build and transfer wealth, secrets kind of the wealthy. Some of the things we're going to be going over today, you probably have never heard of. There are reasons for that. But everything we're talking about is 100% legal. Just because it's not well known doesn't mean that it's not legal. But there are very, very creative ways to use these laws and to use the codes to make sure that you're really utilizing them and really capturing on what we're going to be teaching. Our whole goal, again, is to help you minimize and ultimately eliminate capital gains taxes. Have any of you guys heard of the swap till you drop technique? So it's where you basically buy property and you can keep 1031 exchanging it, deferring your taxes. And if you wait till you pass, then your kids actually get that step up in cost basis and it eliminates capital gain taxes. So it's the best way to transfer your wealth. And then we're going to be going into 1031 exchange and DSTs at a pretty high level. So the state of the market, obviously 2020 and 2021, those were like unicorn years. They were the best years of real estate. We were going up by 20 and 30% each year. We had the lowest interest rates that we've ever had in the history of our country. They went down to 2.625. The average 30-year fixed is about 7.25 over the last 40 years. So obviously it caused a huge boom in demand. Also with the dynamics of the pandemic, the shift of where people work, it was also allowing people to just want to move outside of where they were at. The housing dynamic and the needs changed. We actually ended up selling 6.8 million homes in 21, which is the highest homes that we've ever sold in any one year. Usually it averages about 4.8. Now last year, obviously we had 2.625 go to 7.25. It was the highest rate spike percentage-wise that we've ever had. By far not the highest rate, because as some of you guys know, the rates were 18% in the 1980s. So we didn't get close to up there. But when rates triple like that, usually it's supposed to make the market either crash or if nothing else correct. And it really didn't even do that. A correction is a 10% depreciation over year, and it didn't even do that. We actually went up by 0.9% in LA County, and the whole state of California went down by 0.5%. So this crash that everyone talks about on the news media is just to scare you. And really what it was doing was allowing cash investors, hedge funds, insurance companies to go and buy real estate. People of last year, the buyers, 60% of them or even 65% of them were actually hedge funds and insurance companies. So they were gobbling up whole entire communities while the whole rest of the media was scaring the average buyer not to buy. So it caused a lull into it, but we still sold almost just as many homes as we did in an average market. We sold about 4.6 million homes nationwide, and 4.8 is the average. So we really didn't even have that crazy crash. It just looked like it compared to number of sales sold the year before because of our unicorn years. Right now, we're sitting at a 5.625 to 5.785 interest rate, which is a great interest rate. It caused buyer demand to pick back up in the beginning of this year. Houses are starting to sell. They're actually starting to go over asking price. And a lot of that is just because there's no inventory. We're at the lowest inventory that we've ever been. An average market sells about 800 homes on the market. Right now, we're at about 200 homes in the market in LA or in Ventura County. So we're a lot less homes, and it's a great time to sell because there's just nothing on the market. But then if you sell, then where do you go? So you want to make sure you have that other place to go. Buyer demand is picking up. Millennials are starting to want to buy homes, and even the generation below them are starting to buy homes. So there's 25-year-olds. It's the most 25-year-olds that have ever owned a home are owning a home this last 2-3 years. So where we're headed, really, no one can predict that. No one has the crystal ball. What I can tell you is that over 50% of people who own a home own it outright. So people are sitting in a really good situation. 60% own a 50% or more, and over 90% own at least 20% equity in their homes. So even if we come on hard times, rates go up, no one needs the sellers in a position to be distressed to sell. And that's what caused that 2007, 2008 market crash. So we're in a lot healthier spot than we were. Obviously, we go into a depression. If we keep going in, further into the recession, it could affect the market. But most sellers have already shown that we'll just hold on tight. In most recessions, historically speaking, real estate actually goes up, not down. And we've appreciated by 5.6% every single year, year over year, if we take the average of the last 40 years. So making real estate still a great investment to have. And one of the reasons is because when you invest into real estate, if you have $500,000, you can buy $1 million, $2 million, $3 million of property with that $500,000. If you buy stocks, that $500,000, you can buy $500,000 of stocks. And when it appreciates on the $500,000. When you buy real estate, you can leverage that. So when you buy a $3 million piece of property with $500,000, when it appreciates by 5.6%, it's appreciating on the $3 million. So it's a great investment to have. This kind of just shows a little bit that the pricing did slow down. We went up by, again, 20 to 30%, and we've slowed down to that 0.5. We're already starting to head back up again because there's no inventory. But sales are still down just because there's just no inventory. So if there's nothing to buy, people can't buy. Houses are sitting on the market a little bit longer, but those turnkey homes, those great opportunities, they're still selling relatively pretty quick. This just goes to show that over the last 30 years, real estate goes up. Yes, it has its dips, but it usually generally, you want to hold it on long term. True wealth in this country, the true indicators are how long have you owned your home and how many homes have you owned. So with real estate, all you want to make sure is that you can afford the monthly payments. So the way that you make sure of that is you make sure that there's money inside your bank account or inside some type of account that can be liquid so that you don't go under from it. And this is just to show you with interest rates. I mean, we were up again as high as 18% in the 1980s. Right now, we're about 5.25, and it's still a great time for purchasing home from interest rate perspective. So what we do, again, as a real estate planner, we help you analyze your real estate portfolio. So we'll look at the real estate that you have. We do an asset performance test to make sure it's optimally performing. We look at your capital gains tax assessment to see if you were to sell it, what are the implications of it? And then our whole goal is to try to look for ways that we can limit your capital gain taxes. We can also look for, whether you're trying to get cash flow, whether you're trying to get appreciation, whether it's a long-term play, whether you want to build passive income, how quickly you want to do that, what that number looks like that for you. Some people want to do 2,000 to 3,000. Some people want 10,000. So we kind of look at what your goals are and making sure that we can accomplish those goals and what you need to do in order to do so. With real estate, don't ever gamble. Make sure that you're making a smart real estate investment. Make sure that you're not buying something with the hopes or the gamble that it's going to increase. Do it with a long-term play. Make sure you can afford the payments, and it'll go up. If you are going to get into fix and flipping, the number one rule is if you buy a fix and flip, you have to be able to buy that house and tomorrow sell it for more money. If you can do that, that's a win. If you can't do that, that's a gamble. So whenever we buy our properties, we make sure that if we bought it for $500,000 tomorrow, we could sell it for $525,000, $550,000, and at least make some kind of profit. And then anything above that is butter. So we'll develop a strategy based on what those are, and then go from there. So there's two types of properties. There's your primary residence. So it's anything that you've lived 2 out of the last 5 years. You get a $250,000 capital gains tax basic exemption. If you're married, you get $500,000 as long as both you and the wife are on title. If there's more than one person on title, let's say there's 3 people on title, as long as on the IRS you filed it as your primary residence, and each one did, you actually get $250,000 per person that was on title for the last 2 years, 2 of 5 years. And And then those ones that you don't live in, that's an investment property. Those are subject to state and federal capital gains taxes, and those are what we're trying to eliminate. So when we look at a net sheet, this is basically, we take the sales price, the cost of selling, we minus the loan balance, and that gets you your net proceeds. But that's different than your capital gains taxes. That's just what you're going to actually walk away with at that point in time, not including taxes. What is cost basis? This is basically the cost of the value of the property upon transfer of ownership. So there's two types of cost basis. There's step up and cost basis, and that's the value of the property at the time of death. And then there's carryover cost basis, which is the value of the property at the time of the initial purchase or transfer. So if you, let's say you own a home and you want to transfer it to your kid's name to try to help him out, it actually hurt him, there'll actually be an implication on taxes. It's better to keep it into a trust, wait till you pass, and then they get the step up in cost basis. So if you're trying to bless your kids while you're alive, one of the best things you can do is help them buy a home. You buy it, keep it into the trust, and then when they pass, or when you pass, they're actually get the step up in cost basis. So if you bought a house today for $500,000, 25 years from now, it's worth $1 million. They're actually going to inherit that home at $1 million step up in cost basis. So they could sell the home and pay no capital gains taxes. They can keep it for 2 years, 5 years, keep it as their primary residence, and then get the primary exemption and eliminate the taxes on top of that $1 million. Does that make sense so far? Again, if you guys have any questions, let me know. So again, the ways that you can, you get the value from the recipient that acquired the property. If you own a home and the mother passes away, the property keeps in her trust. The trust says it goes to the son. The son acquires the property at the current value at the time of death. If the son sells, he may not pay any capital gain taxes, as long as he sells it within 6 months. If it takes 6 months after, you'll have to do what the house was worth when he inherited it to what it's worth at that point in time, and then he might have to pay capital gains taxes on that difference of it. Then the carryover cost basis is, again, this is the mother adds the son to title prior to death. The mom passes away. The son acquires the property at mom's cost basis. So it's what she bought the property for and what it was worth at the time that they transferred it to his name. And that's where you're going to have to pay a lot of capital gains taxes, and what you don't want to do, unless he was going to do a 1031 exchange, and that could help eliminate it. But obviously, if you want to do the best thing for all parties, you want to get that step up in cost basis. This is a state capital gains chart. I'll focus on California because we're here. We have one of the highest of 13.3%. This is a long-term capital gains chart, so not flips, not anything that you hold less than a year, sometimes even 2. And then on top of there's the federal gains taxes. So you're looking anywhere from like 28 to 32% on capital gains. So if you had $100,000 of capital gains, you would pay about $30,000 to $35,000 in capital gains tax, which to me, you don't want to pay any of that. So if we can help you eliminate that, the better. For the fix and flippers, the people that do that, it's even higher, and it's based on your income and how much income you make. So it can be as high as 24%, and then in addition, the 15 to 20% for federal taxes. So you could pay 48 or 44% on your short-term capital gains taxes, and that's sometimes while fix and flipping, wholesaling doesn't make any sense, because there's probably a better way to do it. If you buy the property as a flip, say that you bought it as an investment property, rent it for 2 years, fix it up, rehab it, refinance it, and then 2 years later, you can then 1031 exchange it into the next flip. And that way you eliminate your capital gain taxes and you keep on holding on to it. Again, we will do an asset performance test. This helps you make the wise decisions. So we basically take your property, what your expenses are, what your income is, and then we come up with a total value to see how much and how well your property's performing. We do look at the capitalization rate, the return on investment, and your cash on cash returns. Your capital gains tax assessment, again, we are not a CPA, but we understand it enough to at least show you what the implications are. And then we always ask you go to your CPA to make sure. And sometimes they might need to have a little education of what it is. Just because they're a CPA doesn't mean they're a tax advisor and really understand 1031 exchanges. So if you start investing, make sure that your CPA is savvy and understands it. And there are some pretty high-level tax advisors that really understand how to utilize the code to the best ability. So again, capital gains is the net selling price minus the adjusted cost basis. The adjusted cost basis is what you initially bought the home for, plus any improvements that you have and that you can prove. And then the remaining balance would be what your capital gains taxes would be. And again, that could be as high as 30 to 40%. Each, obviously each state varies. And again, just a disclaimer again, we're not a CPA, always confer with your CPA, or we can work with him and actually go over our plan, go over what we came up with, and to make sure that we can eliminate those capital gains taxes. So at this point in time, if there's any questions about what we just talked about, please let me know. But we're going to introduce Anthony Alosi. He's with First American Exchange Company. They're one of the most reputable. I think it's, it's a good fit. He's going to go a little bit more in depth about what actually is a 1031 exchange, go over some a little bit high level stuff, and then answer any questions that you have. So thank you so much, Anthony.
Pleasure. Good morning, everyone. Let me start off by first saying, Cory, I got some news for you. You're a pretty darn good public speaker. So,
oh well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you did real well. So thanks for the intro, and again, thanks for having me here on the call or on the Zoom. Yeah, I'm Anthony Alosi. I'm with First American Exchange. I've been with First American for 27 years. I've been running the exchange company for about 23 of those years. Before that, I was in the escrow and title side. So I've been around a while, done a lot of transactions, and happy to be here today and answer questions that I can. So let's run through. Do you have some slides here, Cory, you're going to go through? Yeah. So when we talk about an exchange, what is an exchange? And I always tell people it's a tax deferral program. It's specifically set up for investors, people that own investment real estate, allows them to defer the payment of capital gains tax on the sale of their investment property, as long as they buy a like-kind property. So unlike the exemption that you get for your primary residence, right, the exclusion, the 250 and the 500,000, where you have no requirement to reinvest, a 1031 exchange is just that, an exchange of property. You have to sell something and ultimately buy something in order to defer the gain. So as Cory explained, the swap to you drop, I always refer to it as defer, 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 then die, right? At your death, your heirs get the step up in basis. And that's really the way that we see our people preserving their wealth. And that is the strategy, right? I always talk about 1031 as kind of a two-pronged benefit, right? They get the immediate benefit today of the deferral of the capital gains tax. But really the big benefit is something they're probably not going to see, or they're not going to see because they've now since passed, but their heirs get that step up in basis, and the capital gains tax gets relieved upon their death. And actually, just to put a fine point on a couple of things Cory said, capital gains tax for California, state, 13.3, federal, up to 20%. We also still have the 3.8% for the Obamacare tax if they meet the income threshold for that. And we also have depreciation recapture as well too. So if they've been depreciating the property, they're going to be subject to that as well too. So some California investors near 40% for capital gains tax, even on long-term capital gains tax, 38, 39, some 37%, depending on what their income is. But it's a big number. So we have definitely seen a dramatic increase in the number of 1031 transactions over the last couple of years. And for obvious reasons, right? Again, people, it's all driven by gain, right? The more gain they have on their property, the more they want to do an exchange. And again, I'll say the same thing. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a tax attorney. I facilitate 1031 transactions. So I would say the same thing as Cory said. Make sure you've got a CPA on your team that can assist with you, a tax attorney, an expert in that can kind of guide you through that.
And Anthony, if we could, before we go next slide, can you just explain a little bit who you're with, why your company is so reputable, what for an intermediary, just in case they don't use you, and then kind of what an intermediary does.
And kind of, what was the last part, Cory?
What an intermediary, and what you do as an intermediator, like what is the position and the job of that?
Yeah, you bet. So, I'll thank you for the shameless plug for First American, but it's noteworthy because exchange companies are not created equally, right? Number one thing I tell people, the industry for 1031 accommodators, for qualified intermediaries, they aren't regulated at all. There are zero regulations of being qualified intermediary. So you hang out your shingle tomorrow and you're in the business, good to go. So for us, we're part of a big, safe, secure, publicly held highly regulated title insurance company in First American. First American's been around 130 plus years. They're traded on New York Stock Exchange. They do $6 or $7 billion a year. They're a big, safe, secure company. And with that, how that translates into the exchange world is we provide a guarantee of the exchange funds. One of the functions of the QI, the qualified intermediary, is to hold the money. So between the time you sell your relinquished property and acquire your replacement property, the funds have to sit with the qualified intermediary. We provide a safe harbor, as they refer to in our world, of those funds. The funds are protected by First American Title. They're set up in a separate, segregated, interest-earning bank account under your Social Security number or tax ID number. And First American Title Insurance Company provides a written guarantee that says those funds are protected. What's the function of the QI? The QI really is there to provide that safe harbor of the money and prevent the customer from having any constructive receipt of the money. Why? Don't know why. Couldn't even tell you why. That's just the way the rules were written about how QI should function and what they're doing. There's a rule that says that the taxpayer, the exchanger, cannot touch any of the funds. So we prepare the documents to comply with 1031 on state and federal levels. We perform what we call an assignment into the escrow or the transaction, where we basically step into the shoes of the taxpayer, the exchanger. On the relinquished transaction, which is their sale property, we become the seller in essence for them. On the replacement side, we become the buyer, so that we make the transfer, quote unquote, the exchange for them. And we handle the flow of the money. Escrow closes, the escrow holder, the title company, whoever does the closing on the relinquished property, wires the money to the exchange company. When we're ready to buy the replacement property, we coordinate that with the closing agent on the replacement property, and we wire the funds to that escrow, title company, closing agent, whoever it may be. What's great about First American, of course, is I'm part of a big company. You know, they're all over the map. I can do a transaction anywhere. 1031 is federal. It's not just designed for California. People come and go as they please, move across state lines, no problem. So for us, again, and we have offices all over the place. Not that that matters. I can do an exchange in my Southern California office for anybody. Doesn't matter where they're located. So for us, again, we operate in that world where we can, move across state lines. But the role of the QI is very limited, right? I mean, we're not there to provide tax advice or legal advice, but we're in the business of customer service, and we're in the business of helping the exchanger meet their goals, much like Cory and his team do.
Yeah. So I just want to put a pin on that, is that to be a QI1, there's no regulation. So any one of us can do it, and you're giving them your money, and there are companies that have taken off with that money. Also, there's very few that actually give a guarantee like First American does. And then it's also why you're able to not pay taxes on it, because technically it never touched your hands. So you can't sell an investment property and then go, oh, actually, I want to do a 1031 exchange, because that money's already been touched by your hands, so that it would not allow you to qualify. Now you can do it the other way around. We'll go into a little bit, but you can buy an investment property and then do a 1031 exchange, and it's like called a reverse exchange into it. But I digress. So we'll go to the next slide before I just
but since you brought that up, though, let's be real clear on that, Cory. You can do a reverse exchange, but you can't buy the property. I have to buy it for you, right? So we have to set up a holding company, a holding entity that acquires title to that property for you. Then you have 180 days from that point forward to dispose of your relinquished property, and then you enter into an exchange. So I always call a reverse exchange a parking transaction. First American is going to park that property for the client and hold on to it for them until they can sell the relinquished property. For them, they're still doing a delayed exchange, selling the relinquished property, buying the replacement property. They just happen to be buying the replacement property from me, from First American.
Copy.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. It's all you.
Okay. We talk about, the like kind requirement for 1031. And, anybody who's been around, 40 plus years remembers back in the 80s when 1031s were very popular, but you had to be more property specific. The like kind requirement says if you sold residential, you had to buy residential. If you sold commercial, you had to buy commercial. So it was very property specific. Now it's not that case. Hasn't been that way since the 90s, the early 90s. 1991, I think, is when they finalized the tax code. 1031 simply says exchange investment property for investment property. property held for productive use in a trade or business or held for investment for other property held for productive use in a trade or business or held for investment. So what does that mean? And as Cory here illustrates, it's really anything for anything that's held for investment. Single family for a shopping center, a vacant land for an apartment building, a condo for a DST. Doesn't matter what the property is as long as it's held for investment or used in a trade or business. So the spectrum for 1031 exchange, for 1031 exchangers is enormous, right? It's people that own rental property. It's people that own multifamily. It's people that own triple net leases. It's people that are in the DST world. It's owner users that own their own, industrial center or their own commercial property. So we see a lot of different people coming to the marketplace for 1031. When I started in the exchange world back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were doing a ton of 1031 transactions for the farmers in Southern California that were still there, like Chino, Ontario, Corona, those areas where they were used to be cattle ranches or dairy farms, maybe more specifically. And all those dairy farmers either sold and moved up to Northern California, Central California, or they got out of the business and bought apartment buildings and commercial property and industrial buildings. So mixing and matching property type, totally okay for 1031. So the guidelines for an exchange, this is the nitty gritty for a 1031 transaction. This is the time frame. It's a timed event. In order for you to be fully tax deferred, you've got to be able to identify your property within 45 days and be able to close on it within 180 days. So the lifeline of an exchange from start to finish is 180 days total. It's calendar days. Day one is the day after we close escrow. So if we close escrow yesterday on Friday, today is day one. You've got 180 calendar days to acquire any and all replacement property that you've identified. Now, again, in the big picture, 180 days, relatively easy to work with. That's roughly 6 months. You've got 6 months to acquire the new property. The challenge is of those 180 days, the first 45 days is the identification period. And that's where it gets challenging in today's marketplace, really in any marketplace. Identifying properties is the big challenge that people have with 1031. There are two rules you can utilize, one or the other. The most common rule is the 3 property rule that says you can identify and ultimately acquire, but you don't have to, identify 3 properties, right? 3 properties without regard to value. So if you sold a property that was $1 million, you can identify one property that was 1.1 million. You can identify another property that was 2 million, and you can identify a third property that's 50 million. I'm limited to 3. I'm not limited to value. And of those 3, I can acquire one of them, 2 of them, or all 3 of them if I want. But I'm not required to acquire everything that I identify. Most people use the 3 property rule because they're selling one and they're buying one, and they have 2 backups. That's generally what we see. The other rule is the 200% of value rule, and the 200% of value rule says you can identify as many as you want, unlimited number of properties, but you're capped on aggregate value. The aggregate value is twice or 200% of the property that you just sold. So back to our example, you sold $1 million property, you can identify 200%, $2 million of real estate. Could be 20 properties, they're all $100,000 each. Great, no problem. The aggregate is capped at 200,000. The number of properties is unlimited. Same rule applies. You're not required to acquire everything you identify. You just need to make your exchange, you need to satisfy your exchange on the identification.
And within that 45 days, they can identify 3, and if one falls off or they want to exchange that one, they can notify you to switch that one out.
Yeah, you can definitely revoke a property within the window, Cory. But I always tell people, make it easy on yourself. Send me your list on day 45, right? Because I don't want someone sending me a list on day 15 and then revoking on day 20, resending on day 32, revoking that on day 42, and then send me the list when it's final.
Copy.
Whatever you're doing in the 45-day window, great. Look for property, put deposits down, do your due diligence, all these, do your inspection. Yes, great. On day 45, that's when you have to notify the exchange. That's it.
And we'll tie this in a little bit, but one of the properties can be a DST. Absolutely. And that's kind of like your safeguard to, if the properties don't work out, you can identify the DST as one of your properties or within the 200% rule. And that at least gives you the safe haven of not paying those capital gain taxes, which is the whole point of 1031 exchange.
That's right. So we've got, well, this is I don't know if you have this slide here further on, Cory, but I want to cover something that's really, really important for people to understand about the exchange process. And I always tell people, people hear about exchanges all the time and they talk about, oh, it's complicated, this, that, and the other. It's not. It's very simple. You focus on a couple of things. The first thing you always focus on is the exchange, what we call the napkin test, the simple guideline for 1031. In order to be fully tax deferred, you've got to buy something equal or greater in value and equal or greater in equity to what you're selling. So
sorry, I was trying to see if I had it, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's noteworthy because, again, that's where people get themselves all confused and tripped up and don't understand the exchange process. The exchange process is simple. You sell for $1 million, you got to buy something $1 million or more to be fully tax deferred. If you net $750 after paying your expenses and your debt, the $750 is the equity that has to be replaced into the new property. So those are your two requirements, value and equity. And I bring it up because this is where people struggled in the last 2 years, Cory. People that had made a ton of money on their property, they bought it for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Now we're coming to the marketplace because they were selling it for $1.8 million or $2.2 million. And they're like, oh my gosh, I've got this windfall. And we're talking to them about the exchange process and how it works. Realize you got to buy something for $1.8 million or more. And they're like, wait a minute. No. I don't want to do that. I made $1 million. I only want to invest $1 million. Well, no, unfortunately for 1031, you've got to invest value for value, equity for equity. You're not going to have that situation where you're going to just, net some money out of there and walk away and just replace the gain. You have to replace the full value of what you sold. So that's where people got a little bit into trouble last couple of years with going, okay, well, I do want to take some money out. Is that going to affect my exchange? And no, it won't. That amount that you exclude is what we refer to as boot. And boot is taxable, and you pay tax on the amount that you take out. So if you sold a property for $1 million, so again, my point is, you're going to talk more today about, talked about basis, and we heard about depreciation and gain, all those things. As funny as it sounds, it has no bearing on a 1031 exchange. An exchange involves value and equity. Those are the components. If I sell for $1 million, I got to buy for $1 million or more. If I want to be fully tax deferred, if I net $750,000, the $750 is the minimum amount that goes into the new property. Again, I can do for less. I'm going to have some exposure on those monies that I take out. Not the end of the world, but people have to realize if you sold for $1 million and you only bought $500,000, that $500,000 is boot, and you're going to pay tax on the $500,000.
And we'll talk about different ways to eliminate the boot. And also you can sell $1 million of property and buy 3 different properties that, as long as together combined, they're worth over $1 million, that would suffice the 1031 exchange.
Yeah. I mean, the two best strategies, Cory, for 1031 investors, consolidation, diversification. Simple, right? Don't spread your eggs out in one basket, or build it up into something bigger and better. Okay, so I think we've kind of talked about that, but yeah, I mean, the benefit of the exchange is obviously the deferral of capital gains tax. That's today's benefit. The future benefit is that preservation of wealth that you're going to be talking more about today. And that's really where that comes in. It's just defer, the step up basis upon your death. Your heirs get the property, and they have so much more flexibility at that point. So again, moving out of state lines, different properties, different property types. Again, same thing, not putting our eggs in one basket. Those are the way to diversify your portfolio, and that 1031 exchange allows you to do that. The time frame is going to be the big challenge.
And then you have to buy in the United States.
You
can't buy outside the country and go buy a retirement home in Puerto Rico, or maybe Puerto Rico qualifies, but
yeah, Puerto Rico actually doesn't, which is funny. It's weird about Puerto Rico, but like Guam does, right? Some of the U.S. territories do, but yeah, that's probably a whole nother conversation. So yeah, a good time to exchange, of course. Why do people exchange? I mean, they exchange because they want to, they've got property that are underperforming. They want to take advantage of the gain they have in there and be able to spread that over 2 different properties. They want to relocate, because their one market isn't doing great. Maybe they have some co-ownership issues with a co-owner or a tenant in common. They want to get out of that. They want to be able to create a financial plan for themselves, because maybe they're thinking of moving out of California into some other location. So there are a lot of reasons why people defer or do 1031 exchange, none of which are to defer the gain. That's an afterthought. Most people are thinking about, you know, the wealth step up, if you will, and the 1030, the benefit of the exchange, the benefit of the deferral is kind of a secondary thought for them. Right. So a lot of them are relocating. Like I said, they have ownership challenges. They want to get into a different property type. They want to get their underperforming property out into a better performing property.
And a lot of people will use the 1031 exchange. I shouldn't say a lot, but one thing that we teach is to, when you have investment properties, to sell them and then to go help your heirs buy homes in that 1031 exchange so that you can bless them while you're alive, as well as build up that legacy plan. And it's a lot easier to do your inheritance plan, your legacy plan, when each kid is inheriting the property that they wanted, instead of, let's say you have a $10 million apartment building and 4 kids are going to inherit it. All 4 kids will have a different want or need of what they're going to do with that property. And a lot of times that ends up in dispute. Rather, mom, grandma could sell the home and then buy each kid $2.5 million of the property that they want. And then they are going to get the step up in cost basis once the grandma actually passes away or mom actually passes away. So it's a way that you can bless your kids while you're alive, and it will help their financial future and teach them how to invest into real estate.
Yeah, the last point I'll make here as well too, Cory, and that's a great point. Remember, the other benefit of the exchange, there's no cap, right? There's no minimum or maximum amount you can defer. Unlike your primary residence exclusion that's capped at 250 for a single person or 500,000 for a married couple, there's no cap on 1031. So again, you can defer 50,000, 500,000, or 500 million. And, you know, again, back to what I kind of talked about before, the spectrum for 1031 properties is, you know, I always call them Joe and Mary Smith, but Joe and Mary Smith who own a rental property, and, you know, they have 2 or 3 of them. That's their, you know, their complete portfolio. All and then on the other end of the spectrum, it's, you know, a Fortune 100 company that owns an office building in Manhattan that's worth $2 billion. That's the spectrum for 1031. It's that diverse and that broad. So for now, we have no cap on the exchange, on the limits for deferring capital gains tax.
And one other, like, you know, we'll go into this a little bit further in the next segment, but as long as you lived in the property for 2 of the last 5 years, you get that 250 to 500,000 capital gains exemption as a primary residence. If you were to then rent it out for 2 of the last 5 years, then you can actually 1031 exchange the boot that's on top of there. So you can actually get both capital gains exemptions and really defer and minimize your taxes. So it's another level that you can do. So if you own a primary residence and you're like, hey, I have $1 million of capital gains, you get $500,000 of that free, but then you'd still be paying about 100, maybe even more, maybe 200,000, depending on your tax basis. So there's a way to eliminate that other 500,000 by renting it out for 2 years, and you can actually take advantage of both, take some money out. And some other people, you know, in that same situation, you can get like a home equity line of credit, pull that out tax-free, go buy your next home, and then rent that house out for 2 years, and then do a 1031 exchange, get your primary residence exemption out of it, get that money back to pay the HELOC, and then actually 1031 exchange into another investment property. So there's some pretty cool things that you can do by combining them, as long as you understand the rulings of it. Any questions for Anthony? Why we got him? Anything that we want to go further in? No. All right. Well, I thank you very much, Anthony, for being here and for letting us know. And oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Cory.
Yeah, you can see his old.
So when we transfer the 1031,
Here, because he might not be able to hear you, but we'll microphone you out.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much, Terry Frost, Coast Recovery. Good to see you guys. So when we transfer the 1031 exchange to your company, what's the costs on that? Did we mention any of that?
Yeah, I mean, our fees are actually fairly straightforward. We have a threshold. If the property being sold is $1 million or less, we charge $1,000. $1 million to $5 million, it's $1,500, and over $5 million, it's usually $2,500.
Cool. And then an advantage to using us is we actually comp that of our commission to cover the 1031 exchange.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions?
I always tell
Okay.
people, don't shop for the low price leader when it comes to an exchange
I don't
company.
know if I missed this, but you said your company guarantees, or you won't, like, there's companies that are unreputable and they run off with your money. How does that work with your company? You said that you're
Oh.
accountable to who?
Well, we're accountable to our client, the taxpayer.
Yeah.
First American Title Insurance Company provides a written guarantee that says the funds are going to be placed in a safe, secure bank account. And if it's not, First American carries enough in reserves to cover any loss on deposits. But for us, like anybody, we're going to put the money in a bank. We're going to put the money in a AAA rated or AAA rated bank or better, a publicly held bank, so that we can monitor the performance. I mean, we have a treasury team at First American that all they do is monitor the performance of our banking relationships for the exchange company. You know, again, not saying this to impress you, but I mean, exchange companies are holding enormous sums of money in the billions. In the peak of the market in 2000 and 2001, we were holding in excess of $5 billion. So for us, we take the safety of those funds very seriously. And yes, there are independent companies out there that have absconded with monies because there's nothing holding them there other than their name and reputation. There's no oversight for 1031, unlike title insurance companies who are highly regulated by the Department of Insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Any other while we got them here? And again, the cool thing is Anthony can help with 1031 exchanges across the country. So it's not just for properties bought and sold in California. It's pretty much everywhere. And as you can see, it's pretty accessible. So if you ever have questions, we can kind of look over what we're doing. But when we do 1031 exchanges, Anthony is who we personally use. Ultimately, you can use whoever you want if you had someone else that you preferred, but he's our preferred guy. So I appreciate you, Anthony.
You bet. Thank you, Cory.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, have a great rest of your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
So next was going to be Charles Jensen. He actually woke up with pink eye, so he's not going to be able to make it. I just, and Harry could probably help me just kind of tell a little bit about them. But they are the #1 DST sponsor in basically the country, if not the world. They are highly, reputable. They do big projects like owning ESPN centers, Google buildings, Amazon buildings, student housing, senior housing. So there's a lot of vetting that goes in with it. If you want to just tell a little bit about the story, I know you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't work for Inland, but I've heard this presentation so many times. I feel like I kind of do. But Inland is one of our sponsors. We're a financial planning firm, Impact. Inland is one of our biggest sponsors in the DST space. They're founded by 4 teachers in the Midwest. They own ESPN headquarters. You know, if you drive down the 110, the hotel or student housing now, right across the street from USC, that's a DST building. They own Verizon and AT&T headquarters. So DSTs nationally are accounting for about 13% of all 1031 exchanges. So every year, I think you'll see more and more. A lot like Anthony alluded to, a lot of investors are trying to diversify their portfolios, not only geographically, but higher class buildings, better quality buildings. A lot of our clients, where we see a lot of exchanges going into DSTs, is deferred CapEx. Like, clients have had their buildings for quite some time. They know all this deferred maintenance expenses are coming up. They don't want to pay it or go through that pain of going through construction or remodel or roof change, water main, whatever it may be. So they go into a DST. They just want to collect a check. High quality investment properties. This is actually my favorite slide, because not all real estate is the same. From this slide, I don't know if you guys can see from there, but retail space, office, multifamily, industrial, student housing, healthcare, and self-storage. Self-storage and multifamilies personally are favorites, but they all perform differently, obviously, in this economic environment. We see self-storage and multifamily being, performing pretty well. We see, the demographic population changing in the US. You see People go from single family homes to apartments to senior housing. And all this alludes to multifamily doing well, self-storage doing well. And the performance overall, annual rate of return, 11.6 for multifamily, 13.95 for storage. It's performed remarkably well. Again, with inland, this is a slide that Anthony alluded to earlier. This shows a 5.2 national average state tax. Obviously in California, we're at 13.3, 40% lopped off the top. No one wants to see that happen. You should keep exchanging and passing on to your heirs. That's the most tax efficient. This is not a new concept. You know, most of us have 401ks, compounding interest, rate of return. That's essentially what this is. And instead of a Roth where it's tax-free withdrawals, you're never gonna sell your property. You should never sell your property. You're just gonna keep exchanging. The problem is most people have their properties written off all your depreciation. So we get a lot of clients, complaining about taxes every year. What you can do is exchange and leverage up. Some people don't like leverage, but you don't even have to leverage that much to help your, income. It'll definitely increase your income by leveraging up, but it'll also give you something to deduct. I mean, this is how people and families grow wealth. Cory and I were talking about this earlier. It's rare that you see families own one apartment building. They generally own multiple assets. You see a handful of families, the fact that you guys are all sitting here, you guys did right in life. You guys bought property and are holding on. You should just keep on exchanging. So I don't know if there's other slides with inland.
I think that was, just the most part of it. And they're one of the many DST sponsors that Impact works with. It was just, again, they're the number one. And I think it's important to know that DSTs is that other holding spot that you can put properties. So DSTs are perfect for, and we'll go into it a little bit more further in depth, but if you own a property for 30 years, you fully tax depreciated it, but you don't want to be a landlord anymore, DSTs is a perfect place for you to put them, because you're still going to get an annualized return on your money, as well as you still get the appreciation of the real estate that the DST does own, and you can 1031 exchange into them. So at this point, the lunch literally just got here, so we're just going to take like a little potty break, and then we can get some food, and then Troy Water with Impact will be speaking next. Perfect.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, we'll have you go because I'm going to say the lunch sponsors. Okay. Hey, actually, we can do that right now. Oh, okay. Okay, one of our partners. All right. Yeah. We'll do it when we come back in. Perfect. All right. So those online, we're going to be back. It'll probably be like 10-15 minute break, and then we'll come back on.
Yeah. What? He's confused about the building, so I hope I cleared it up.
Or the front, either one.
Or
somebody's here trying to. It's the blue guy.
There are signs.
There's something.
There's signs on the front too, so.
There's signs everywhere.
How's it going, kind sir?
Hey, good.
Yeah. Glad you can make it.
Yes, I know. I lost the first one that I had.
Good stuff.
Thanks for that.
Do a lot of work with England.
Charles, he was supposed to come and all of a sudden he showed a picture. You got like pink eye. I was knocked out yesterday.
For inland, yeah, I mean, they're the
It's a nice.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Fascinating topic.
I'm very down. Yeah. I'm actually playing Steve. Well, I'm glad you could make it. I don't want it to be a good, but really, they performed pretty well. So people could go full cycle, then go after.
But in order to know our team is.
Yeah. Like office space, headquarters, the pandemic happened. A lot of office space.
And it's just coming up.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it would be tough. Like there's a major conflict here now. You know, they're. We don't want. We're definitely. It's not. You like it better.
That's what I'm looking for, you know, I'm looking for.
I want to see it's like a turn pretty bad and refrigerator. We're gonna make we're gonna do that ADU and then we're about.
Like, so I'm.
Yeah.
I'm.
I think we were just gonna, yeah, yeah. But we're gonna see it.
Yeah.
My counterpart was constantly, or, you know, you have a good idea, you have a good idea, and it'll help me. Like, you know, they're not.
Is it in Ventura County? I have one side of the.
Oh, no.
Gotta be like.
That's quite cool. It's
Because when we're making them without to be a.
Yeah.
You know, they're already system on good here. State.
Burbank is big. I live in Burbank.
Yeah.
But now.
Sweating it off.
Not right until I moved to Austin, you know?
Yeah, no, we had one,
Yeah, okay.
we bought it for six. We got it at for 9. They backed out and let someone pull it. They backed out. And I was patient.
Wasn't there. That was amazing.
When everyone scared of everything. Pulling over the house. Fortunately, to come in here and wear your mask.
Bring your mask, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I could imagine. We tried to be, I mean, like. You know, obviously we work in big space, but I was literally sending out FedEx packages. And clients were even scared to, you know, go to FedEx, so you could call maybe but even that was too much. They would have FedEx pick up at their home. So they would leave it outside their house, they have to like drive around. All around Southern California, shop FedEx, sign paperwork, packaging. That's how it's.
Have you done?
We scheduled a senior living option. What the date was, but over at the reserve.
Oh, yeah.
And we're gonna do a sequence of them.
Oh, that'd be good. With,
Sunrise.
oh, great. That's excellent. Yeah, I would love to do that.
And he's after him in the bus, he's like, I want to speak. I'm like, I'm gonna get you. No, hey, so Harry, why don't you
You're like, I'm doing it, you can do it.
Yeah, the next part is really. It's high level, but it's more where I think little red street feedback. Okay. And I try to, he's gonna go for an example that's a point. Exactly what I want those questions answered. Yeah. And how do I get down?
Okay.
You know, I did. You want to with these. Hopefully, I have food here, so I figure we'll ditch up and then maybe come back down here. Sound here probably should be on any minute. He's from Hawaii and he understands.
He's the one you were telling us
Yeah,
about.
no one I've ever.
Oh, nice.
Cool. Where's it going? Yeah, so, and same thing, what we're talking about is activity because. So,
Yeah,
you know.
and some of it was like a refresher from what you talked
Right,
about.
yeah.
And we know we were coming, we just said, hey.
Save it.
We'll be here.
Well, that's why, but it's
But that's-
good, you the first time it's like,
I can hear.
it's
10
too much,
times.
now it's like, hey, I'm starting to, now I'm understanding what he's trying to say,
I got a lot of questions, but I'm not. I'll refer them to you.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Fix them, their own contract. Winding down.
yeah, we
Still have some energy to do that.
Yeah, we love doing those things, but what we do is really cool. The dream will actually pick up the home for the buyer. So we'll buy a house to the same, but then I'll have the buyer come in and say, what do you want us to do? Work with our designer or contractor, and do exactly what we want. So it's better than KB Homes because you're the ship that they're update and then we don't charge an arm and leg and we don't have any net fees. And then sometimes we'll even commit the seller to not sell it at a house if you go with an escrow and they'll become the little bit flip it. And they'll make take and then for it. So it's like a win-win-win situation for everyone. I got there's a burnt down house in not fire damaged house in CME that we're trying to pick up right now. And then there's a hoarder's house in CME that we're trying to pick up. So we get involved in doing.
Okay.
I have 3 teams. One of the teams was he was the general contractor. We kind of had a little falling out. And more just because I've referred him to his ball jobs. I never heard him anything. And he was gonna go buy his real estate. He's like, so what are you gonna do? I'm like, what do you mean? Well, these guys that I identified with the realtors, they're willing to discount their commission line. I've given you so much business and you're asking me to, like, you know what? Go use them. Like, I don't need you. Just don't accept another job for me. And my other 2 teams, it's just a bunch of subs that they're not like a general contractor. And most of the thing, like,
They're not licensed?
no, like, as long as you're like we're redoing like cosmetic lipstick flips, so like, as long as you're not doing it, then do you really, you know?
My son-in-law, my daughter and son-in-law live in Simi.
Okay.
They live on Grover, which is LA Ave. Off Yosemite. Okay. Right in that area. But he has a buddy who's doing a lot of flips. I forgot his name, but he was even telling me he was involving with the health. So my question was to him was, where does he get these homes? It's not easy to. Buy flips.
We get them from the senior living home.
Huh?
We get them from the senior living here, so when the senior needs to move into the counties, they have to just spread it out home, can't sell home.
So I don't know what connection he has, but I think he's like doing 3 or 4 simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
But that's what I asked him. Said, who's he using? Because he was telling me about his cabinet guy. He's, putting in kitchen cabinets for $22,000. I'm thinking, because I have cabinet guys, I'm used to working in custom homes too, but he was telling me that his subs aren't licensed. Right. So he's
Most of the
getting
time.
stuff done.
Yeah, most of the time, you just want them, exactly, you just want them in and out, like, I mean, like our cabinet company, but sorry,
Yeah, and he could be getting, they could be getting those prefab cabinets and just installing them, which is.
yeah, and that's what we get them from like Cabinet City or that's pure and stuff, and I get a 50% discount. So it's like I can do like my that was the expense and it's like a huge kitchen with an island and they're real plywood and it's like. Okay, squared off. So I'll close the doors and drawers. I mean, am I gonna put it into a $3 million home? No, but that's a difference.
All right,
yeah.
Cory. She did, and it's like, sweet, she'd be gone.
We get Troy on or?
Yeah, other days.
Hey, Troy. We're literally just broke to eat. Everyone's just kind of dishing themselves up. So probably like 5 minutes and I'll have everyone filter back in.
Can you hear you?
I think so. It's oh, can you hear me now, Troy?
Is it him? Might be him. Looks like you're on.
Yeah, I'm on. Let's see. Might not be able to see me as what it is. Yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah.
Hey, Troy, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. We're just finishing we broke for lunch. Everyone's just dishing up. So give it like 5 minutes and I'll filter everyone back in here. Cool.
All right, no problem.
And then I'm gonna
would
make
you
you
be-
I'm gonna make you co-host right now, and that way you can share your stuff.
Got it.
Perfect. Cool. All right.
There's so many versions.
Everybody's doing. All right. What do you think?
So far, so good. You're doing great. Just don't hurt. Wait, I'm worse than you. I'm just critiquing with here. Don't be afraid to slow down a little bit more, because when you turn the other way, what you're starting here, you don't finish your sentence. Just, I know it's hard, but if you can any of that, I asked Harry if it was loud enough. It didn't seem loud enough to me, the speaker. He said yes. So he's not there. Other than that, no, it's great.
Cool.
Good with Anthony up there. Yeah, I think it's going good. Well, I'm gonna tell you something, that RSVP kind of goes to what Harry was saying. I tried yesterday because I knew I didn't, but then it's something about, now again, it's me, something about cookies, about, so I just shut up. It's like, no, either, because like. Really,
We're gonna do it like an
something like
Eventbrite
that.
from now on. Use like an Eventbrite, something like
You
that.
need the e-bite, they just say RSVP and how many people, you push it and you're done.
Yeah.
This one, it said. Get into your-
No, it was a
Like,
Google form, so it's like it was a little
I'm just letting
archaic.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, the guys like me got scared. It'd be nice to get RSVP, you know what.
Yeah. Perfect.
But yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, this Troy's like, it's gonna blow your mind about like what he talks about, like. So,
This is the DST thing.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna grab a Coke and actually, no, I'm not gonna grab a water. All year I haven't had a Coke yet, so I'm not gonna break. I almost broke down just at a natural I haven't I haven't seen him probably since he actually played in the tournament with you. Yeah, it's been that long. I've been trying to get him to come out and with the baby and everything. Yeah, it's like so. And I was like, "Did I have 6 kids? I don't want the excuse that you can't play because you got kids. Like, you can find a way." Yes. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Got you, fella.
Yeah. Good thing it was good conversation.
All right. So we're gonna get started in about a couple minutes, and that way, Troy, and you guys can eat in here. It's totally fine. And the good thing is Troy can't see you, so it's not affected by you guys. And is the sound okay on the speaker that we see? Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Cory, just want to confirm you guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah. I literally just asked that and everyone said, yeah, they can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
So go ahead and talk again.
Can you hear me fine? Testing
All right,
one.
so let me see if I can turn that up just a little bit. PC. Go ahead and talk. Oh,
How about now?
let's go ahead and say a sentence.
How is this? Can you guys hear me okay over there?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mine comes in really loud, so I won't talk, which is a good thing. So we have a 3-minute warning, Troy, and we'll have people start filtering in here.
Okay.
And just so you think
Got
that you know that you're not here alone talking to yourself, there are people actually here. And if you want, if it makes it easier, I can do this so you don't feel like you're not talking to someone. However, whatever make you more comfortable.
Actually, if we do that, that'd be great, because then if they got questions, they can raise their hands and I can spot them.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, gets to the majority. Yeah. Yeah. All righty. No. So now I'm going to whisper because I feel like I'm yelling at people. All righty. So again, this is Troy Wada. He's one of the principal wealth advisors for Impact, which they are a DST exchange company, brokerage company, as well as he does financial planning as well. So with no further ado, I'll let you get into it, and I'm going to shut my microphone off.
Thanks, Cory. Hi, good afternoon, everyone over there. I'm calling you from Hawaii, and it's about high 70s, low 80s today, blue skies. So that's probably the reason why I'm actually physically not there in person today for this. But thank you all for accommodating our virtual presentation. So as Cory mentioned, my name is Troy Wada. I'm the principal wealth advisor of Impact Wealth Solutions. And how we know Cory is we forged a partnership with Keller Williams through the real estate planner community to work with their realtors nationwide to give them outside of the box 1031 exchange ideas in regards to their investment property. Here in Hawaii, we work with several organizations like the largest utility company, largest private employer, city county employees on various islands, and we do basically the financial planning and overall wealth management for these individuals. But as Cory mentioned, how we know Cory is through the Delaware Statutory Trust. Now, the reason why we have to, as a financial planning firm, have to specialize in 1031 exchanges and working with real estate investors is because a lot of our clients, physically own real estate as a way to build and transfer their wealth. Now, whenever we talk to our clients and, what are some of the reasons why you own real estate, we'll probably get very similar answers here in Hawaii, and I'm pretty sure they're in California. So what are some of the responses, that we get when we ask our clients about their investment property? Well, first of all is, I own investment property because I want supplemental income. How many of you in that room have ever read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki? All right, I see a couple hands up over there. That was the first book my grandmother ever forced me to read and give her a book report on, as a kid. Funny enough, fast forward today, Robert's nephew physically works in our office here, and he helps me. Jason is Robert's nephew, but that's exactly right. In that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki talked about multiple streams of income, and basically that is owning real estate is a great way to basically build those multiple streams of income, because the definition of retirement is when your money's working for you, so you don't have to work for it, right? Now, another good benefit that comes with real estate and non-retirement stocks is this tax benefit or treatment called a stepped up in cost basis. Now, what that basically means is that any real estate titled in your own name and kept in that name or title or trust that is left behind to your beneficiaries upon death, your beneficiaries' cost basis would basically be the value of the property on the day that you died. And I believe Cory touched on this earlier, right? And that's a powerful way to basically leave these types of assets behind to the next generation. Now, owning real estate is a great way to diversify your portfolio, especially as what we've seen happen in the stock market last year. I'm sure all of you are happy that you have some money in real estate and not all of your money in stocks. But real estate also comes with great tax benefits while you own it. And what I mean by that is income tax benefits through the form of depreciation. For all of you that own real estate investments, and actually if you have looked at your physical tax return recently, you would have seen that your CPA fills out a form called the Schedule E on your tax return. And what that is it's basically the IRS's way to recognize passive losses on your investment property, and those losses can be used to offset your passive income, which is basically the income that you collect. As you know, aging properties, right, usually lose value over time in the form of your building, right? And residential properties has a useful life of 27.5 years, and commercial properties has a useful life of 39. Now, the reason why the IRS puts limitations like this on is that the idea is that the useful life of your building will have a zero value on your residential property 27.5 years from now, which means that if you want to restart your depreciation benefits, what you need to do is basically knock down your home on your property and build another one every 27.5 years. Now, the problem is that most people won't physically do that, and therefore the depreciation ends and those tax benefits go away. Now, obviously, one of the biggest reasons why, real estate is attractive as an investment, besides the income aspect of it, is the appreciation. Now, here in Hawaii, real estate prices shot up 40-something% in the last 2 years. A lot of that because of COVID, little supply, increased demand, right? And we've seen real estate prices shoot up. I'm sure the same thing happened there in California. Now, like any other investment, whether it's stocks, real estate, bonds, any investment that comes with a reward will come with risk, right? So what are the reasons or risks associated with real estate? The first one, I like to call them the terrible teeth, you know, the tenants, the toilets, and the trash. You know, how many of you in that room today love your tenants and love it when they call you to fix things on your property? Raise your hand. No one's raising their hand. So, you know, that's a very common theme, right, that we have across the US, right? Dealing with those tenants and the maintenance upkeep of those properties tend to be very troublesome. Now, of course, from an estate planning perspective, when we leave real estate, although it comes with a great tax benefit to leave it behind to your children, the drawback is that we've all heard of issues when 3 kids inherit one property, right? You usually have the first kid who actually read Rich Dad Poor Dad. He's fiscally responsible. He wants to keep the property, keep getting his portion of that rental check each and every month. But usually there's a kid who's a spendthrift, right? In Hawaii, you know, a lot of people in Hawaii love Las Vegas. I don't know if you folks know this, but Las Vegas is called the 9th island here, you know, in Hawaii. And there's always going to be that one kid that wants to cash out his interest in his property and take his proceeds and go to Las Vegas and gamble it away. You know, and then there's usually the third kid that's living in the property that doesn't want to pay rent. And because they all can't agree and they hold title tenants in common, they're basically forced to be in business together and they have to agree. And the definition of compromise is that everyone loses. And what basically happens is that everyone is forced to sell the property, take their proceeds, and do whatever they want with it. Now, putting all of your real estate in the same zip code may not be the best way to diversify your real estate investments, but the taxes that are associated with real estate sales, as you know, Cory and Anthony mentioned earlier, is quite large. You know, actually, when you look at it from a perspective of capital gains, state capital gains, depreciation recapture, and net investment income tax, if the profits are over 250, it's basically huge, right? And it's the highest tax asset sale in the nation, real estate. Now, we've all heard, or we all know what happens when we have a vacant property that has a mortgage on it, right? We still have to make our mortgage payments, you know, and we're actually losing money that month when our properties are vacant. But as I mentioned earlier, the maintenance and upkeep of aging properties will erode your rate of return. And this is what is interesting is that, you know, for our clients, we work with a lot of people nearing retirement. And the one thing that they will tell us is that I'm nearing retirement, so I think I need to be a little bit more conservative. Real estate works in the exact opposite way, right? The older your property gets, the more risky it is. I was just on a call this morning with a Keller Williams realtor, you know, in Minnesota, looking at her property, debating if she should sell it because she knows in the next 3 years, she's going to spend about $25,000 to repair the roof. And she's making $8,000 a year in net rental income. Well, that's 3 years to pay off the roof. Does it make sense for her to exit that property now? Right now, the potential of a failed 1031 exchange was a huge problem in COVID. You know, when we were in a market where, you know, a property would have an open house on Sunday with 25 people waiting in line to get in and 15 offers all above asking on Tuesday, you know, finding a replacement property and doing a 1031 exchange was very challenging. Now, no matter what market we're in, identifying quality property within 45 days is stressful, right? And, you know, doing a 1031 exchange is great when you're in a seller's market, which technically we still are in today. Not so good being a buyer, though, in a seller's market, yeah? Now, real estate in general is illiquid, but, you know, the potential cap rate or the cash and cash return that we found in Hawaii, as well as there in California and multiple states across the U.S., tend to be very low in relationship from an income percentage. So let me tell you how we kind of figure that out. So in this particular example, we have a 3-bedroom condo here in Hawaii, valued at about $1.45 million with a $600,000 mortgage. A 3-bedroom condo of that size and in that type of building would get about $4,300 a month in rent. After the mortgage carry, of about $2,500 of principal and interest payments and all of the maintenance fees, taxes, expenses, and insurance, this investor is losing $141 a month, or a negative about $1,700 a year. Translated into a percentage, that's a negative 0.19% cash on cash return. Now, for the math majors in the room, the one thing you notice is that the mortgage is the biggest expense, right, out of that person's rental income. And at some point, there'll be no mortgage on this property. And assuming this investor bought this property all cash for $1.45 million and did not carry a mortgage, he would have a cash flow positive situation of about $29,000 a year, or a little over 28. Okay. When we translate that into a cash on cash return, that's basically a 1.97% cash on cash return. Now, as you know, interest rates have gone up, right? And some of you are probably thinking, I can get a 3-year CD at my local bank for more than 1.97%. You know, why does it make sense for me to invest, you know, especially in a point in time where I'm nearing retirement? You know, I want multiple streams of income, and I'm in a position now that more income is better for me, you know? So what we've been able to do over the years, or what we've identified over the years, is that in a time period when real estate prices are the highest that we've ever seen, and incomes, especially if now we're buying property at higher interest rates, are the lowest we've ever seen, how do we take our existing real estate investments and make it more productive by either an income perspective, a tax perspective, and an estate planning perspective? And that's kind of where the DST can come in and help. So what is a Delaware statutory trust, or a DST? Well, a DST is a way for 500 investors to pool their money together with the intent to buy bigger and better property. Something like an Amazon distribution center located in Thornton, Colorado, that we bought for about $120 million. Now, there's an internal revenue code attached to the Delaware Statutory Trust in which the IRS will recognize these kinds of programs to be treated as like-kind property when doing a 1031 exchange. And as you guys learned today, like-kind property could mean anything like a single-family home, a condo, a commercial property, even an Amazon distribution center. As long as it's not your primary residence and its intent is to be held as an investment, you're able to 1031 exchange in and out of these kinds of properties. So what are some of the benefits and reasons why our investors have found the Delaware Statutory Trust to be attractive? Number one is that we understand that the number one rule when doing a 1031 exchange is that you always have to buy equal to or greater than the value that you sold. Meaning that if you sold that $1 million property with a $500,000 mortgage, we'd have to replace $1 million in real estate with $500,000 in proceeds, which means we need to get another $500,000 mortgage or add $500,000 in cash. Now, we know that this is probably the case for many, that they own their investment property with a mortgage. Therefore, we have Delaware statutory trusts that already have a mortgage on it. Now, the stipulation of a Delaware statutory trust is that there can only be one loan per property with only one borrower. And in every event, the sole borrower is going to be the sponsor company. Because can you imagine having to qualify 500 investors for a mortgage? That would be impossible, right? And the bank doesn't want to have to come after 500 investors. So what they do is they place a loan, which is the sole responsibility of the sponsor company, on the property, and all of our investors have the ability to participate in that loan without having the liability. They don't even need to qualify for the loan. They're automatically approved, and it won't even show up on your credit report. Now, there's some unique things that you can do with this loan feature that you will cover today, and I think that you'll find very interesting. Now, in many cases, we can increase the rental income, but the big one, that we're seeing a lot, and why, a lot of our senior clients are looking at these kinds of investments now, is that we get them out of the day-to-day management, right? We help them simplify their life. No more terrible teas, no more tenants, toilets, and trash, right? They want more time for the terrific teas, like time with the grandkids, or tea times on the golf course, or traveling, right, with their family. We can continue to defer taxes using the 1031 exchange. We get access to institutional quality real estate. The minimum investment in a DST is $100,000, and we can diversify our real estate portfolio, not only geographically, right, but also by the type of real estate asset we own, because DSTs come in many shapes and forms. They can come in the form of an Amazon distribution center, a multifamily community right outside of Phoenix, Arizona, that has 300 plus single family homes, brand new construction, Class A resort-like amenities. It could be student housing. There's actually a student housing DST at USC, near USC right now, that is available. It could be self-storage, healthcare, right? We can diversify in many different asset classes in many different states. Now, from an estate planning perspective, the DST is very attractive. Remember that example with 3 kids inheriting one property, right? Where the 3 kids inherit, and because they're not all the same, and because they hold title tenants in common, they have varying views on what they want to do with their real estate, but they all have to agree. A DST is fractional ownership. When those 3 kids inherit their interest of the DST, they can each do what they want to do with their own interest, not contingent on what the other kid wants to do with theirs. So let me give you an example. If the kid wants to, the fiscally responsible kid wants to continue to collect income from his DST, he would simply just leave his proceeds in there, and he get a check on the 8th of every month. Now, for the kid that wants to take his proceeds and go to Vegas, he would take his proceeds from his DST and go to Las Vegas. The only kid out of luck is the one that wants to live in the property and isn't paying rent, okay? He cannot move into the Amazon distribution center and say, I own the bathroom on the 3rd floor, so I'm moving in, okay? But what he could do is he could get the rental income from the DST and rent something else, take the proceeds from the DST and buy something else, okay? So it allows the ability to minimize conflict. And that is the number one reason why a lot of our senior clients are using these types of vehicles in the overarching estate planning design. Now, think of a DST offering like a buffet line. At any given time, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options available for you to choose from. Depending on your situation, and as Cory mentioned, we are a broker. I like the term better, we are a fiduciary, which that means is that our job is that we work for you, not the DST company. So based on your situation, what is right for you in terms of your risk, your current proceeds, your loan to value, income, your overall financial plan, we will match you with the right DST product or property from the right DST sponsor. And we will usually identify and close these types of programs in about 10 to 14 days. Now, as Cory and Anthony mentioned earlier, we have 45 days to identify property, right? We will identify and close much faster than those 45 days, and your rent check will start the very next month. Now, besides the fact of, simplifying our clients' lives, creating a more efficient estate transfer plan, what we love about the DST is that there are no longer any maintenance upkeep costs, no aging property to have to deal with, no expenses to ever have to worry about, and it is the easiest way to hold on to investment property to leave behind for your children so that they can get the step up in cost basis, because that step up in cost basis will also apply to the DST, because it is treated as like-kind property by the IRS, okay? So how can a DST help you, right? And how can proper planning help you? Well, what if you already did a 1031 exchange and you're here today because, you know, you got some leftover proceeds and you're wondering what to do with it because you don't want to pay any taxes? Well, here's our client that basically sold an apartment building for $6.75 million, and it had $1 million mortgage. Her net proceeds was $5.75 million, and she found a much smaller, newer, easier to maintain apartment building, and she bought that all cash with $4.5 million of her proceeds. Now, the problem here is that she has $1.25 million left in proceeds, but if you can do some simple math, she needs to buy $2.25 million in real estate, right? Her first property at 4.5 means she needs to replace an additional $2.25 million, but only has $1.25 million in proceeds because of that $1 million mortgage she had. To make things worse, she was referred to me on day 43 by her realtor of day 45, and she has 2 days left to find replacement property to avoid all of her taxes, and she probably won't qualify for $1 million mortgage because she's in her 70s and living off of fixed income, right? Now, definitely in today's interest rate environment, she for sure wouldn't qualify for $1 million mortgage, okay? So what did we do? We identified a Delaware statutory trust that had a 50% loan to value. What that means is that in that Amazon distribution center that was bought for about $100 million, 50 million of that property was equity, and 50 million of that property was a non-recourse loan, right? Which the sole borrower was the sponsor company. What that means is that by adding 1.25 million of equity into her DST, she was able to participate in 1.25 million of a non-recourse loan because she will buy a total of 2.5 million of real estate in that Amazon distribution center. We were able to identify that property on day 44, and we were able to close this property about a week later, right, allowing her to defer 100% of her taxes. If you look here, she bought 2.5 in her DST, 4.5 in her first apartment building. She bought 7 million in total real estate. Her DST pays her about $62,000 a year in total income. Now, the moral of the story here is not to call us on day 43. Okay, that's not the takeaway. Okay, the moral of the story here is that if we did proper planning, right, and we identified her investment property, we could calculate and reverse engineer how much she needs to put in the DST to replace her mortgage so that she could take the remaining proceeds and buy the investment property of her choice, all cash, right? So that eventually she'd be 100% debt-free. Now, not to mention, if you look at this, the combined income between her DST and her current apartment building is actually more than she's collecting on her old one. She no longer has a mortgage on her credit report, and she no longer has to maintain and manage the property. So this is a great way to plan, right, on how to better utilize your current investment property if you have a mortgage. Now, how many of you have a mortgage on your primary residence? Yep,
Troy,
go ahead, Cory.
can we go back to that one slide? I just want to mention, and she also reset her tax depreciation. So her tax liability is even lower than it was on that first property. So the 162,000 is probably almost all tax gain free, as where the 130 she was probably taxed at that point in time. Sorry, go ahead.
Because we ended up buying more real estate than she sold, which is why she was able to restart her depreciation schedule and therefore minimize some of her taxes. Now, great point, Cory. Now, how many of you have a mortgage on your primary residence but not on your investment property? Any of you? No? Okay. We come across this situation a lot, you know, primarily because many times people use the equity in their home to buy that investment property, or we're all taught to pay off our highest debt, highest interest debt off first, which is always going to be our investment property, not our primary mortgage. Now, in this particular example, we had a client that had an investment property valued at about $1 million. And at the end of the year, after maintenance, expenses, taxes, insurance, and all this other stuff, they're netting out about $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year. And they have a $180,000 mortgage on their primary residence. What we told them to do right before they sold the property is take out a $250,000 home equity line of credit on that property. And what they did is they took those proceeds off, paid off their mortgage. They needed to do some minor repairs on their investment property before they sold it, and they kept the balance in cash in their savings account. We then worked with their realtor to sell the property, and what happened is we sold the property for $1 million, and the proceeds, right, paid off the $250,000 home equity line of credit, leaving us $750,000 in net proceeds. But if you remember, we need to buy $1 million in real estate. We 1031 exchange the proceeds into a Delaware statutory trust that has a 50% loan to value, which meant they get to participate in $750,000 of that non-recourse loan. We bought $1.5 million in total real estate. And again, to Cory's comment, we got to increase their depreciation expense, and actually the DST pays them more income than they were collecting. So what happened here? We increased their income that they're getting on their rental property. We reduced the taxes that they owed on that income, and we reduced their expenses because we paid off their mortgage, right? And because that $250,000 wasn't paid by escrow, it was not paid by the qualified intermediary, and we did buy more real estate than we sold, the $250,000 is taken out tax-free from the transaction. Okay. Now, we have a lot of clients, that basically are looking to go into a long-term care facility. We've all heard, the terms silver tsunami, right? Baby boomers, 10,000 individuals are turning 65 in the U.S. every single day up until 2030, right? This aging demographic, is now worrying more so about not so much retirement, but beyond that. So in Hawaii, we have a senior living community and assisted living facility that has a $1 million buy-in and an $8,000 a month monthly cost to stay there. Okay. Now, this particular client basically has her primary residence. She lived in pretty much her entire life, but has been vacant for a little over 2 out of the last 5 years. And the reason for that is that she's been having to move and live with her children for a period of time. And then they finally put her into a temporary assisted living facility because there's a wait list on the one that she really wants to get into. That's the $1 million buy-in and the $8,000 a month to stay program. The kids have been trying to rent out her property, but we all know what happens, with properties that's been lived in for 30 plus years. They basically have a lot of stuff in there that you need to move out. And having to move all those things out and deal with her mom, they've had a hard time renting it out, but it has been vacant, right? Now, they came to me because what they wanted to do was sell the primary residence, pay off the $1 million mortgage, pay $1 million in taxes, and take $1 million and use that as their down payment to move into that living facility that her mom really wants to be in. They want me to invest and manage the remaining $1 million to provide them $8,000 a month in income. Now, for those math whizzes in the room, $8,000 a month on $1 million is a 9.6% income stream for the rest of her life or the rest of her stay there. If any of you have an investment paying 9.6% guaranteed for life, let me know. I will put 100% of my money in it. We do not have anything that pays that type of income. So what I suggested they do is helped their mom co-sign on a cash out refinance. And because she lived in the property for 2 out of the last 5 years, and because its intent was to be an investment property and was vacant for a little over 2 of the last 5 years, she was able to use 2 tax strategies. Anthony and American National Exchange has white paper out on this, and basically what it is that if your property was a primary residence for 2 out of the last 5 years and an investment for 2 out of the last, you're able to use the 121 homeowners exemption, which in this case, her husband passed away a very, very long time ago, so she could not use his. So she had a single 121 exemption of $250. We did a cash out refinance on the property of $750, and then we sold the property for $4 million. After we sold the property for $4 million and paid off that existing $1 million mortgage plus the additional $750 on the cash out refinance, and she took her $250 from her 121 exemption, she was left with $2 million in proceeds. We 1031 exchanged that into a 50% loan to value DST. Of course, that replaces $2 million in non-recourse debt. She didn't buy more real estate in this example. She bought the exact same amount, which still satisfies the 1031 exchange requirement, and she's able to defer 100% of the taxes. And her DST pays her about $100,000 a year in income, which is about enough to cover her stay there. And again, in combination with the 121 exemption and her cash out refinance, she's able to take out the $1 million tax-free. So just on a little side note, if her husband would have passed away within 2 years from the time of her selling the property, she would have been able to use his 121 exemption too. So she would have been able to pull out $500,000 from her 121 exemption because of that little clause there in the Section 121 rule, where you can use a deceased spouse exemption as long as they passed away within 24 months of the sale. Okay. Now, any of you own vacant land in the room today? No, so you're pretty smart. Vacant land, as you know, usually doesn't pay a lot of income. Okay, but I'll share you an example of one that does. And this particular client of ours in Hawaii owns a piece of vacant land that has a land lease on it, valued at $20 million, and she's collecting $700,000 a year in rental income from this property. Pretty damn good income, right? How many of you would want this investment? Raise your hand. Yep, most do. Okay. Now, the reason why she was sent to me was that she was complaining to her private banker and her high net worth department at one of our big banks here in town that she's paying too much in taxes and that they're not doing a good enough job to help her save money on taxes. Now, how many of you think you're paying too much in taxes? Raise your hand. It should be everyone should be raising their hand. You know, in this case, right, she's getting $700,000 in income. She's paying $380,000 in taxes, and she's netting out $320,000 in net rental income. Okay. Now, when she was referred to me, I said, okay, well, let's build a financial plan to see how and where, you know, the problem is and how I can fix it. Right. Not to mention, she tells me I have about $1.2 million in more existing debts and mortgages on my other investment properties I own and my primary residence. And I'm thinking of buying another property for $3 million, which I'm going to go get another loan for that because I want to just go and stay there on the weekends. It's a very prominent strip of homes right along our coastline here, north of Waikiki. And she wants to live along the coast and basically visit there on the weekends. And she's willing to spend $3 million on a house like that to do that. Okay. Now, the first thing she tells me is, I'm never selling this property. And I think some of you would agree, she shouldn't, okay? I'm never selling this property. My dad almost went bankrupt when he bought this, just trying to keep it. And if you can imagine, this land used to be swamp land near Waikiki in Hawaii until they got gentrified. And basically now it's worth $20 million. Okay. So what I told her to do is I got her approved for a $4.5 million cash out refinance from her bank. And I wanted her to pay off all of her existing debts, buy that investment property with cash, and I want her to 1031 exchange the proceeds into a Delaware statutory trust, which meant that she needs to sell the property. But if she did this, she would have been left with $15.5 million in proceeds, which we would have 1031 exchanged into a 50% loan to value, and she would have replaced $31 million in real estate. This DST would pay her $620,000 a year in income. And basically her comment to me was, are you crazy? Why am I going to sell my property that is paying me $700,000 a year in income to do your property that's only going to pay me $620,000? I said, well, you'll be debt free. You won't have any more mortgage payments on your other properties. And you would own that property that you want debt free. You'd have no mortgage payment on that. But it's never about how much money you make. It's how much money you keep. And as you know, vacant land with no building on it doesn't come with any depreciation benefits. And this is the power of depreciation. Because that property we exchange into has buildings on it, which we can depreciate, for $620,000 in income comes with a $867,000 depreciation expense. If you notice, she has $247,000 of excess depreciation, which she could easily use to offset the taxes owed on her other rental properties. Which means on her $620,000 of income that we pay her, she pays 0 taxes on that income. It is 100% tax deferred, and she nets out $620,000. So now I'll ask you, which property would you rather have? The one that pays you $700,000 in income that you pay $380,000 in taxes on, and you net $320,000, or would you rather have the property that pays you $620,000 that you pay no taxes on, and you keep $620,000? I think the answer is kind of obvious, right? Oh, and because same reason, because we took the cash out earlier, right? And we bought more real estate than we sold, the $4.5 million was tax free. Now, here's a very unique way in which you can access your cost basis in your property tax free. Just as a financial 101. Real estate is always taxed last in, first out, meaning that in this case, our client bought this property for $700,000. Well, actually, she bought it for a little more, but after depreciation, her adjusted cost basis is $700,000, and now it is worth $1.2 million. If she touches any penny from this property in terms of the equity, she will pay taxes on the first $500,000 until she can access her $700,000 tax free. So what we advised her to do, because she actually wanted her $700,000 to buy a second home that she would live in, and then she would turn her existing primary residence into a similar situation that I just showed you earlier for that lady moving into the care facility. She wants to use her 121 exemption and 1031 the balance. But because you cannot 1031 exchange into a second home, right? Its intent needs to be investment. She needs a way to come up with funds to buy that second home. So what we did is we told her to 1031 exchange her $1.2 million in real estate into something called an umbrella partnership real estate investment trust, where in step number 1, it's a Delaware statutory trust. In the 25th month of owning this investment, this property, which could be J. Lang LaSalle's Houston, Texas headquarters, would become a part of a larger real estate investment trust. After being in that real estate investment trust for a period of 13 months, he's able to utilize a 131 partnership exchange and take out her cost basis tax-free. What happens is that in the real estate investment trust, the taxation is switched from last in, first out, meaning that she pays the taxes on what came in last, which is her gains, to first in, first out. She can access her cost basis, which was in first, tax-free. As long as she leaves back her gains of $500,000, she never pays a penny of taxes on those funds, and that will continue to give her income for the rest of her life. These funds also offer monthly liquidations because it's basically a mutual fund in which she can redeem once a month in the event something did happen and she did need access to her funds. She could do that by liquidating only a portion of the $500,000 and only paying taxes on that portion. So as you can see, there's many different ways you can utilize a Delaware statutory trust, whether it's eliminating your mortgage, increasing your overall income, or what you learned today as your cash on cash or your net cap rate, being more tax efficient, of course, by using a 1031 exchange, but by increasing depreciation. For every single client that we meet, when I explain to them that I can increase your gross income and reduce the taxes owed on that income, which significantly increases the net, it's usually a no-brainer for them to do a 1031 exchange to make that current real estate investment more effective and more efficient. Simplifying your life, but providing a more tax, risk, and fair estate plan. Never put your kids on title of your property if you don't have to, because they will lose that step up in cost basis. So like in that example with the lady going to the care home, we came up with that idea many years ago because I had a client, a very successful realtor, 20 plus properties across the US, who originally wanted to sell his properties and 1031 exchange all the proceeds into DSTs so that he could get more income to pay for his $8,000 a month stay. Actually, it was $16,000 a month for him and his wife. Okay. Well, my question to him was, well, how do you come up with the $1 million down payment? He said, easy. I own stocks, I have a retirement account, and I have my primary residence that I bought for $500,000 that I can sell for $2 million today. I got tons of ways to pay for the $1 million down payment. But what's the problem when he sells his stocks? He'll pay capital gains tax. What's the problem when he cashes out his IRAs or his 401k? He'll pay income tax. And what's the problem when he sells his primary residence? He has taxes above the $500,000 121 exemption because he bought it for $500,000 and he'll sell it for $2 million. So what we advised him to do was use that similar situation like we did for that lady going into that care facility. Keep your stocks. Leave that for your children because they'll get the step up in cost basis on those stocks. Cash out your IRAs. Use that in your lifetime to supplement your costs to stay in the facility. Because of the recent tax reform, all non-spousal beneficiaries on IRA accounts have to spend down that IRA in a period of 10 years. Can you imagine what happens to your working children, probably in their highest earning years, inheriting your IRAs that are like $1 million, $2 million, and you add an additional 100,000 or 200,000 onto their income every year? Their taxes are going to go through the roof, right? And lastly, keep your primary residence because that will also get a step up in cost basis, and he can leave that to his son tax-free. By utilizing these strategies, we save his family millions in taxes. And of course, as Anthony and Cory will tell you, it never ever makes sense to pay the tax when selling a real piece of real property. Always avoid the tax using the 1031 exchange because the capital gains tax for the federal and state, especially there in California, but the depreciation recapture tax, which is a tax that everyone forgets about, which is taxed at 25%, plus the 3.8 Medicare surtax, will be a very large number of your proceeds. So at all costs, defer the taxes. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Cory to see if we got any questions, or Cory, if I missed anything you want me to cover.
So there is one question on, sorry, I'm going to talk a little quieter. There's a question on the chat as what are the recipients of the DST doing with their monthly checks from DST? I mean, it's basically income. They can pretty much do with it what they want or reinvest it into something else. I mean, you would agree?
They can't reinvest it back into the DST property that they're owned, because you can imagine there's nothing to reinvest. There's nothing more real estate to buy. But I'll tell you what, when we increase our clients' income by 10, 20 grand a month, and we take away their mortgage payment of $2 grand a month, there's a lot of things that they figure out they can use the money for. So I don't think that's ever the problem. But basically, as Cory mentioned, you can do whatever you want with it.
Right. Any other questions in the room? Now that you have them here, go ahead, Terry.
Minimum time period commitments to the DST, is there a minimum buy-in and so on?
The minimum buy-in is 100,000. On the UPREIT is 250. But the minimum hold on any investment property, whether it's a DST or a townhouse or a condo, that was treated as your replacement property via a 1031 exchange, the IRS wants to see you hold that property for a period of 24 months. Now, the intent of every traditional DST, not the UPREIT, is to be sold, and is to be sold at a profit. And that normally will average, depending on the type of DST asset we're in. So I'll give you an example. Multifamily DSTs and student housing usually have the shortest lifespan. On average, those have lasted about 3 to 5 years. So every 3 to 5 years, we're selling them off at a profit and returning our investors back their gains, plus principal. And of course, the 1031 exchange process and clock starts all over again. You can 1031 back into physical property, like another condo or a townhome there in California, or you could go back into another DST, or you could do both, right? Because as Anthony may have mentioned earlier, the rules of a 1031 exchange is that there's the 3 property identification rule, where you can replace up to 3 properties in replace of your 1 relinquished, or you could identify twice the value of what you sold.
Any other? Oh, wait, here, I'll bring you the microphone so you.
Yeah, I was wondering if you ever look at deferred sales trusts as a way to look at that tax planning in addition to the Delaware statutory trust.
We have looked at that, and depending on the situation, sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't. But yes, that is also an option too.
One thing about the deferred sales trust is you don't get the step up in cost basis for the kids. And it's harder to switch back into real estate. So once you put your money into the deferred sales trust, it's harder to get it back into real estate and do another 1031 exchange, was my understanding. I could be wrong, but that was my understanding of them.
Correct.
Okay. Eddie?
What's the biggest risk in the DST? Immediate risk and then long-term risk?
The biggest risk is loss of control. Traditional DSTs, it's not as easy to get out as your traditional piece of real estate where it's like, I want to sell it tomorrow, so please sell it. They're not going to sell that Amazon distribution center and return you your profits just because you want to do it now. So that's probably the biggest risk. The secondary risk, that I see with DSTs is basically no different than the real property that you own today, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're physically owning is real estate. So, tenant damage, environmental issues, floods, fires, vacancies, all those things still apply. But when it comes to floods, disaster, fires, of course, we have our properties fully insured for replacement value. When it comes to vacancies, that can be mitigated by the type of real estate and the type of tenant that we own. So I'll give you an example. If it's an Amazon distribution center, we want an ultra high creditworthy tenant with a guaranteed secured lease of 15 years at minimum, so that in the event Amazon decides they want to move out of our property in year number 2 or 3, they still owe us 12 to 13 years of rent. Yeah. When it comes to multifamily, student housing, self-storage, we're diversifying our rental pool by the number of units that we have in rent. 200, 300, 400, 700, 1,500, right? So the likelihood of all 1,500 being vacant kind of slim to none. And what that does is kind of insulates our income, against vacancy risk. And so those are kind of, the risks that we look at, but it's very similar for all pieces of real estate. Yeah.
And Troy, one thing I just want you to reiterate or maybe go over is that these are actually regulated products, that not just anyone can sell them, and then to go over the like how you guys would actually analyze a property and kind of do those risk adverse before you even present them to somebody.
Sure. So, the Delaware Statutory Trust, and this is what is funny. I just received an email. Well, I wouldn't say it's funny. It's actually kind of sad, but I received an email from a very prominent attorney in the 1031 exchange space. And there's a group out of Colorado that basically structured a small Delaware Statutory Trust. And they have investors in for the equity piece, but their financing fell through. And what's happened, and this particular DST it's a small syndication, small DST company. They're not using, traditional registered financial advisors to promote the offering. They're soliciting investors online. Okay. And what's happening with this program now, because they can't get any financing, all of the people that 1031 exchange their proceeds into this program, now they're going to get stuck. They're all going to pay the taxes back, right? Because you're going to have to lose this property, and it's going to be a failed 1031 exchange. Now, for us, we work with only highly reputable DST companies that have successful track records. Most of the companies we work with have been in the business for 50 years or longer. They're the biggest in the space, right? And for us, I am a registered investment advisor, meaning that I report to the federal government. My licenses are held, and I am overseen by FINRA, which is the regulatory body by the federal government for registered investment advisors. My broker-dealer has to pre-screen every single one of our DST sponsors and every single program they put out. Now, every DST that is filed with the SEC needs to have an independent third-party due diligence report done and filed alongside with the registration. Now, my broker-dealer, they don't believe the DST company, nor that independent third-party due diligence company. So we go on and we hire our own independent third-party due diligence company to basically do the same thing, to make sure that the property is there, the financing is in place, the numbers are exactly what they say they're supposed to be, and then they'll approve the DST for financial advisors like myself to offer it to our clients. My broker-dealer is Advisor Group. We are the largest independent broker-dealer in the United States today. We have thousands of investment advisors across the US. So we are very stringent on the type of investments we offer our clients because of our size and our reach. Now, I don't believe the DST company, nor do I believe my broker-dealer. And I have my own investment committee in-house where we analyze each and every DST deal before we offer it to our clients. Now, luckily, I have not had a client in 10 years, and we work with hundreds of thousands of them. We've not had a client lose principal, nor see their income decline in any of the DSTs that we've offered. Now, that doesn't mean to say that DSTs don't lose money or incomes reduce, right? I like to say that we pride ourselves on our due diligence up front and acting as our client's fiduciary. We take that by heart. And we will always analyze all options out there and only position our clients in the strongest DSTs. Because at the end of the day, income is not your biggest worry in the DST. Every single DST that is ever offered will always pay income because it will always be rented. The biggest risk to a DST along those lines is what is the likelihood it will continue to pay that income? And what is the likelihood that we will sell this property off at a profit? That's where the due diligence and the analytics come in, is looking at the asset class, looking at the geographical location, looking at the type of property it is, the rent roll, the cash flow, the debt carry, potential value add propositions and CapEx funding in the future and how that looks to the property and what we could resell it at. All those things come into play when you look at a DST and what we're looking at recommending our clients. So I hope that answered your question, Cory.
Yeah, perfect. Any other questions? Okay, Troy. Do you guys want us to do a quick little like case study and we can see how well and how quick Troy comes up with a solution? You guys go with that? Sure. So I'm going to try to point you towards it. So, and I'm not going to out anyone, but this is just something that one of the clients in here or may not be in.
Oh,
here.
Cory.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. You're going to do the case study, or you want me to do it?
I'm going to do the case study and then let you kind of let them show them what you would suggest.
Okay, got it.
Cool. So we have a 4-unit property worth about $420K, bought it for $220. We have a primary residence worth about 1.6, bought it for $685. I might be wrong with that one, but I'm close. And then there's one, it's an investment property worth 1.1 and bought it for 367. So something like that. What our goal is,
385, Cory.
385. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I didn't want to oust you, but and 685 on this one. Okay.
Purchase price 385 on the.
Yeah, so here the purchase price was 385 and this was the purchase price of 685. What we're trying to do, Troy, here is sell the properties and get it closer to where they want to move to. Eliminate capital gains taxes because as you see, there's probably a lot like this property here probably has at least 135K in capital gains. This one has at least 79 and this one's like 35,000. So we're total a little over $200-something thousand in capital gains taxes. One of their kids is buying a home out in Simi Valley area, Ventura County. So we're trying to make it so we can eliminate capital gains taxes, increase their income while still buying property and possibly moving into some DST products. What would you suggest? Can you see that well?
Not really.
Here, let me switch my camera around real quick.
So give me the first 420 potential sales price. Is there a mortgage balance on that?
On the 420 is very minimal on that one. 80,000.
What was the cost basis?
They bought it for 220.
How long ago?
13, no, 20, almost 20 years ago. Like
Between 11 and 13.
2000, yeah. So 11 or 13 years. And it's been renting. What do you get on income for renting? 3,000K in income, rental income.
Is that net or
No, that's
after,
gross. That's gross.
What's the net? What's the net?
After your property taxes, that's net.
Like 25, 26.
Okay. So you're about, let's just call it 2,000 after taxes, insurance, mortgage, and all that stuff. And maintenance and repairs.
Even the mortgage payment?
And their mortgage payment. They owe 80 something on it.
And then tell me about the primary residence.
They bought it for 385. It's worth about 1.6.
Okay, mortgage on that?
90,000.
Okay, and then there's a third property, right?
Third property, bought it for 685. Worth about 1.1.
Okay, and mortgage?
A 118.
Mortgage balance?
Yeah.
385.
Oh, 385 on that one.
And the idea is to
They want
having
to,
rental property?
They want to buy their primary residence, a second home, and a home for possibly for their son. And keep it as, that one would be a long-term investment play for them.
The home for the son would be?
What's that?
The home for the son would be?
Yeah,
What is the purchase price of the home for the son?
about 850.
What is the purchase price of the second primary that they want to get into?
Around the same price.
Around, what do you mean? 850?
Yeah, around 850.
What is our timeline on making all this happen? Are we able to rent out the primary residence for a couple of years?
That was my suggestion. My suggestion was rent it for 2 years, take the rental income, possibly rent another home with that, or help offset their next purchase.
Good. Okay.
It's an easy one, huh?
What's that?
I said it's an easy one for you, huh? Right on the spot.
Well, I mean, I usually need more time than like 2 minutes to
Yeah,
do it.
I know.
You know, but I can show you just a quick example of what I'm thinking. It would be cumbersome. Okay, I mean, I don't want to say cumbersome. That's the wrong word. It's complicated, but doable. And it's going to take a lot of coordination to do, you know, but I think that if we can pull it off, that'd be awesome. Okay.
Confidence, right?
Okay, so hold on here. Just gotta, and you guys are gonna have to bear with me because, you know, I wish, you know, Cory didn't put me on the spot, but
Need to go to Waikiki next week. We'll see.
And we'll do a follow up. We'll do a follow up as well. And again, if it's I know I pulled this off of out of the hat and surprised you with it.
yeah.
But I've also seen
Yeah,
your
hold
mind, how your mind works. So I have confidence in you.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Okay.
And obviously, I've given some thought on this one. You know, we've been going over this for about a week. So
Yeah. Now I'm gonna just do this kind of like it's gonna do it rough, okay, and show you more of like the end result versus comparing against the current, because I kind of want to see how all this works.
and so when we do strategy sessions, this is basically we go over with Troy. We look at it as just buying a properties for properties. And we'll actually look at your whole goals, try to see if we can come up with several different solutions. So Troy would come up with one of the solutions, we'd come up with another one, and then try to either see if we're going to hybrid them or, you know, which one better suits your guys' needs. While he's figuring it out or coming up with, does anyone else have any other questions that we wanted to cover? Any aha moments of like, no?
Okay, so let's try this.
Oh, look, he even got little. That was quick.
There's an example, Cory. So first thing we do, I'm looking at property number 1. Okay. Property number 1, 420, total sales price, 340 in equity, $80,000 mortgage. Forget about how much income we're collecting now. We'll compare that later. My suggestion would be we move only the debt portion into a DST, something like a 50% loan to value, which we have, you know, something close to 50 now. And what happens is 80,000 goes into the DST. We will replace a total of 160, and that one particular transaction would pay 4,000 a year in income. That's on property number 1. Okay, so what that means is that we have 340,000 in cash that we can use for to buy physical real estate without having to take out more debt. Okay, now the second property, which is the 1.1 million, okay, that has, and I just called it 400,000 mortgage. I know it's like 385, but because I only had a couple of minutes to do it, I used round numbers. So 400,000, right, in debt, 700,000 in equity. Same idea. We just put the 400,000 into the DST, replace the mortgage. We buy 800,000 in real estate, and that would generate 20,000 a year in income. Now, what that means is that we have an additional 1,055, right, in proceeds. Now, we mentioned that the house would be, well, each house would be 850, right? So one idea could be, right, that we basically divide this and we exchange proceeds, you know, into 2 properties. One's the son, one's our second home, and then we get financing for the difference. And then what happens is that we will buy all of that and we would defer 100% of the taxes because we would have bought exactly the same amount of real estate that we would have sold. And what happens is the debt carry now resides on the 2 properties, right? That difference between 1.7 million, which is 650 in debt between 2 properties. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then what we do is we use that solution that we used for the lady going to the care home on the primary residence. Okay. 1.6 million. I wasn't sure if there was a mortgage or not on that. So 90,000 mortgage. Okay. On here. 90,000. 500, 10, 01. Okay, so what happened is we'd take 500,000. This is not a home equity line. This is the 121 exemption. So we rent it out for 2 years. We take the 121 exemption at closing, which is 500,000 tax free. We 1031 the balance, which is 1010, into a 50% loan to value DST that buys 2020. in real estate that pays 50,000 a year in income, then what we do with the Section 121 homeowners exemption of the 500,000 that we take out at closing, we use that to pay down the 650 in debt on the other properties that we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
And
that was
then
pretty quick
that's-
there, Troy.
And then we wouldn't have paid any taxes. We would have about 80 grand in passive income coming in a year from all the DSTs. We would have owned 2 properties, and with the 80 grand a year, you probably would have paid off the balance of the mortgage above the 500,000, and you would own the 2 properties tax-free or debt-free. Sorry, you'd own the 2 properties debt-free.
And one of them, the son, once you pass, the son gets that at the step up cost basis, eliminating all the capital gains on that property.
After and he will get a step up in cost basis on the portion of the one he's in.
Right. So
it's not fully taxable, but yeah.
very, very cool, very quick. See, and that's the power. Imagine what he could do if we give him a week to really dive in with it. So that's why you have one of the right persons on your team there. So I appreciate that, Troy. And he was totally surprised by that we had not planned that at all. So anyone else have any questions? I know I do appreciate you, Troy, very, very much.
Same here, Cory.
And if you guys ever want, we can do a strategy session with myself and Troy. They don't cost anything, but I promise they're very, very invaluable, and we can build out your legacy plan for you guys. So I do appreciate you guys. We do a monthly seminar, lunch and learn. Next one will be about planning for your future and beyond. So it'll be just more building out that legacy plan and that family feud prevention plan. And then we also do senior living options every single month at different assisted living communities. So if you have anyone going through those, we can help as well. I thank you guys for coming, and yeah, perfect.
Cory, I'm gonna jump off, but thanks, Cory.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
See you guys later. Have a great weekend. Thanks.
Bye, everyone online.